Well, hello, and I guess welcome back to What the Hell Happened This Week. And if you're thinking, welcome back, when was the first? Well, this podcast has been on hiatus for, I don't know, like 3 years. And coming back because, well, a lot of you have asked for it. It's one of these programs where I'm Tyler Axness, one of your hosts here. You can catch me weekdays on KFGO Fargo. And that's on 790 AM, 94.1, 104.7 FM, KFGO.com. You can find us 2 to 5 on Afternoons Live. But I'm joined to break down what the hell happened this week with my good friend Jason Matthews, political science instructor at Bismarck State College, OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute, just has his finger on the pulse of everything going on in news, both domestically and internationally. Jason, here we are. If people had asked us to do this again, we stopped after, I guess, what would have been the first Trump administration, and now here we are a few months into this, and it's tough to keep up, so people want to get a recap of what the hell happened this week, and I don't know if we could have picked a better week to start. You and I had a kind of a running list because from one day or 1 hour to the next, everything kind of changes. And, right before we're getting ready to shoot this, the feud broke out, Jason, between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
My reaction to the feud that broke out, because we're recording this in full transparency on Friday the 6th. So the feud broke out on Thursday the 5th, and my reaction at first was, like many, I wasn't surprised. It was a marriage of convenience from the beginning. He always knew that. It was just a matter of time before it would fall apart. So my initial reaction was, like Jerry Seinfeld, that's a shame. And then when I saw Elon Musk's tweets, and I saw him say, time to drop the bomb, Trump is in the Epstein files, my reaction was like Ron Burgundy. That escalated quickly.
It did. So you're saying people aren't surprised. I'm not either. I'm surprised at how quickly it evolved, because let me go back here. I mean, it was what, Monday, or if not, it was at the end of last week that Elon Musk is on his way out. We don't know who prompted that. He claims that he wanted to get out of politics. I think you could argue that's not true based on the current tweets. But we go from that to him coming out saying, look, that big, beautiful bill's a bunch of bullshit. My words, not his. And
he said an abomination.
What's that?
He said it was an abomination.
Abomination, yeah. I have some colorful language, I guess, so that I choose to use. He could be a little bit more professional than I am. But I'd question the authenticity of his pushback on that bill. That maybe it was just sour grapes bitter. I didn't know if he really just didn't like the bill, or if he didn't like the circumstances of him no longer being a part of this White House. And then the escalation is what surprised me, that it got so personal so quickly. You bring up the Epstein files. I mean, he agreed that there should be an impeachment. There's now a push to get, the federal subsidies to everything Elon Musk maybe removed through the same process that they were going through in Doge. And this is, I mean, on all facets here. I mean, you have the most powerful man in the world taking on the richest man in the world, both here in the United States. Pretty big platforms, man.
Well, we should all be able to sleep well at night, because one of them has the nuclear codes and the other one has all of our personal data. So what
Sleep
could
well,
go,
boys and girls.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
That'll let you drift right off to sleep. No worries at all.
Yeah, I mean, we can joke about this, but there are manifest, on many levels, manifest threats to American democracy in what's happening right now, in what we're seeing. I mean, this is what you get when you basically have become an oligarchy, and there's no question that that's where the country is heading. The fact that one man like Musk has as much power as he has, where he has that kind of influence, where he's essentially, a lot of people laughed or had their jaws drop when they saw him wrote what he wrote about the Epstein files. My reaction to it was, this is a guy who's sending a very clear and public message to the President of the United States that, and he could be bluffing, but I don't think you should think that he is, where he's coming out and saying, I know stuff. And in other words, he's communicating, I have some leverage over you. And that should give everybody pause here. going into the psyches of these two men, which is always dangerous, and I try to avoid that kind of psychobabble. I think it's pretty clear, though, over the last year that Elon Musk likes the role of being a kingmaker. He likes the role of being a power behind the throne. And what he did was, by coming out, clearly I think it's going to come out that he was pushed out of the administration, or his usefulness had ended. He reinserted himself into the political discussion with coming out against this big, beautiful bill, as Trump calls it. And it put the Republicans in a bind, because all of a sudden you saw about a dozen Republicans in the House that came out and said, well, now we regret voting for this bill. And then you have Rand Paul, who has been consistent in his opposition to the bill in the Senate, and all of a sudden there's some other senators that are now, Republican senators that are now speaking up. And what was being said privately and what you're reading is that a number of Republicans were very concerned about Musk's influence in their upcoming primaries next year, and in using his finances to fund opposing candidates, or even go so far as to start a third political party. That's too much damn power for any one individual to have in a democracy.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, it was a slow walk here. I mean, you can go back to the Supreme Court, Citizens United, allowing all this money to influx into our elections, and to have all these different venues and avenues to use that influence, and then in turn, I mean, spending, what was it, $260 million, whatever it was, during the last election cycle. I mean, quite effectively, clearly ended up in a victory lap. He's claiming that the only reason Donald Trump won was because of, well, the work he did, whether that was through, I mean, Twitter, X, I still call it Twitter, the money that went into the campaign, the ads that ran,
game.
all these tools. He brought up oligarchy. I mean, they're in one person's arsenal right now. And on the flip side of that, you have all the levers of federal government that this president has shown he is not leery of exerting and pushing boundaries that no other president has gone to this extent to use. Well, we're going to find out for maybe some of those personal vendettas. I think you could go through the long list of some of the institutions and individuals that he has focused in, the Department of Justice and the federal funding freezes of things that he doesn't like. You can look at the Department of Education with Linda McMahon, saying basically these universities have to do research that align with the president's, admiration and ambition and his policies. And you see that he's not afraid to use the government in his, I would say, personal line of thinking versus somebody that is going to use Twitter, his billions of dollars to combat that. And never seen anything like this really in the United States that I'm aware of. Maybe you have.
No, there is no historical analogy, perfect analogy to this. I know a lot of people engage in whataboutism, where they'll come back and say, well, we had the robber barons, we had William Randolph Hearst, we had the newspaper conglomerates. We've never had somebody who can communicate and manipulate algorithms that you are seeing in your news feed, in your mobile devices, which we're all connected to. I mean, right. Multiple hours a day, and that's a unique kind of power. And then you take a look at, and this is why, I mean, already this morning you're seeing that there's a push for a truce between the two of them. Yeah. Because they know that this can escalate very quickly. But how do you put that toothpaste back in the tube? You don't. Both of them have sent very clear messages, and there might be a truce, but that eventually it's going to break down again, and that you just have two scorpions in a jar. Is what it is right now. And to your larger point about how Trump is using the federal government, I mean, now he's threatened Musk that we're going to pull these contracts. Mm-hmm. Musk is coming out and saying, well, I'm going to do this with his one of his space projects, pet projects. But this is part of a larger and consistent pattern with President Trump in weaponizing, and I'm going to use that term, weaponizing the federal bureaucracy to go after perceived adversaries. And this has real long-term consequences. Stepping away from the Musk-Trump feud at the moment, if you look at American history, there are really three things that have made us the superpower of the world within the last 80 years. You have our public education system, our university system in particular in this country. You have the rule of law, and you have science and innovation. And those are three areas that the Trump administration, through the actions that this president's taking, not with any congressional action whatever, but through his own actions, are undermining. I mean, already we're seeing the bans on allowing foreign visas for students coming into Harvard and other universities. We are now seeing this brain drain. They're already talking about the brain drain amongst scientists from foreign countries. I mean, think of the millions of people that have been educated in the United States over the last century, who have come from foreign countries to come to our university system, public and private, who have then led the way in innovation, in inventions, in scientific discoveries. We're putting a sign here, do not enter. And that's a golden opportunity for a China or for Europe to bring them in. And once they're gone, and Trump's going to leave the stage, do we get that back? That's the question.
Well, and what's it going to take to build back that trust and confidence that, we are the place where you can come get that well-rounded education. You can have those research dollars for innovations and advancement in cancer research and technology that might get us to Mars outside of SpaceX. I mean, those sort of things, at the very least, are going to be delayed, if not coming back stateside, Jason.
And it's all connected, and it goes back to the rule of law.
Yeah.
Because it's always been banked on by people that the United States is governed by the rule of law, which provides stability, which makes America a solid investment.
One of the things you said just a minute ago about all this being done without Congress, that's where on my radio show, I mean, over the last several months, is Congress, and this isn't just a Donald Trump thing. I mean, this goes all the way back, president, where they keep taking on the executive side, and Congress is willingly saying, "Go have it, go have the ability for tariffs, go have more authority when it comes to war and combat," and the list just keeps growing. I hear, and it just begs the question: what the hell are they even doing? I know that they finally are pushing this big, beautiful bill past the House, and now the Senate. North Dakota's U.S. Senator Kevin Cramer is, trying to add Medicare cuts to this conversation as well. But all these things that they're watching, and damn well, just as well as I do, when this camera's not on or the microphone's not in front of them, what they say in those caucus rooms, I've got to assume completely different than what they're willing to say. It's the lack of authenticity and the lack of courage to actually do your job that I think goes across party lines. Because when I have my very conservative listeners on the radio side, this is an area of agreement where Congress is really just broken. Not just now, they have been. I think right now just highlights exactly how broken they are. And it begs the question of what are they doing and what does it take for them to actually get back into the arena?
We have consolidated power in the executive branch, which goes directly against the vision that the framers gave us. The Congress was always intended to be the first branch of government. I always tell my students this. I'm an adjunct instructor, so I'm not a full-time faculty member. I'm not tenured. I go in, I teach, and then I leave. And I go in and I tell the students that
gig,
I always.
by the way.
What's that?
It's a good gig.
Yeah, it's a great gig. But I always tell the students that when you look at, if you were to do a visual examination, illustration of the Constitution, you would have the Article 1 would go from, about 7 feet up all the way down to the floor. And then Article 2, which is the executive branch, would be about 3 feet long. And then you get into the judiciary, and that's about 1 foot long. Because if you go back and you look at the debates in the Constitutional Convention, it was the thrust, the passions were in how do you balance power amongst the states and the people, and what are the mechanisms by which Congress can function in order to represent the people that elect them. Taxation, going to war, coining of money, commerce, all of those powers go to Congress. Now, what's happened is, and I'm glad you brought this up, because a lot of people, it all depends on what side of the political fence you're on. You know, it's either Congress isn't doing their job when a Democrat's in there, or Congress isn't doing their job when there's a Republican in there. Congress hasn't been doing its job for 30 years.
Yeah.
Power has been concentrated in the hands of the presidency. Congress, basically anymore, is become a performance center, where because of, particularly with social media and with cable news, well, I'll give you a good example. There's a congresswoman from South Carolina named Nancy Mace. She has not passed a single piece of legislation. She's a bomb thrower on Capitol Hill. She's a prima donna. She plays to the camera. She burns through staff, and yet she's constantly on cable news. Why do we know anything about her? You can make the same argument about AOC to some extent, particularly when she came to Congress. It's because the incentive now, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, the list could go on. The incentive now is to get to Congress and perform. Yeah. Not perform legislatively, but perform for the cameras to make a name for yourself. Mm-hmm. We are now an institution, we have a Congress that's full of show horses rather than workhorses. And when there's that vacuum, it's going to be filled, and it's going to be filled by the executive branch through executive actions and proclamations, many of which, I would argue, are extra-constitutional or outright unconstitutional. But here we are.
Here we are, and the only legitimate pushback are the courts. The foot of your articles you're talking about is really the only one that's seemingly willing to adhere to the Constitution you bring up, and the pushback from the administration and inside some of this big beautiful bill. Now, of course, we've talked with some of our congressmen here in the Midwest. They didn't read it, and I know there's going to be people. Oh, Nancy Pelosi said you got to pass it before you know what's in it when it comes to the Obamacare, but they have some provisions in there that it would attempt to limit what judges can do. I mean, they're aiding and abetting the excess of, in this moment, this president, without the acknowledgement that he's not going to be president forever. And at some point, if the Democrats actually get their shit together, they might have a chance at least reclaiming the House, if not the presidency. And then I don't like this under Trump. I don't want it under a Democratic president. I don't want this big executive branch at the whims doing what they want, whether it's on tariffs, whether it's about funding for research. I mean, I don't know. You talk about toothpaste back in the tube. I don't know how you rein this in. I mean, this week, when we're trying to break down what the hell happened, I mean, it's all been just the drama. That's all consuming. And what I fear, Jason, is you pointed up, if you're a Democrat, you have this. If you're a Republican, you got this. The vast majority of people don't have a team. And what I fear is this drama is so exhausting that they just are checked out. They're not paying attention. They don't care unless it comes knocking on their door, or it has some implications of how expensive their groceries or mortgages are. Mm-hmm.
No, you're right. And the danger is, and we are in a dangerous, a very perilous moment right now, because the courts are the weakest of the three branches of government. Because the only thing in the Constitution, in Article 3, says that it establishes a Supreme Court, doesn't set a number of the number of justices on the Supreme Court, and says that Congress shall establish inferior courts, whereas Congress has the authority to establish the court system, and that's what Congress has done. So the courts, the circuit courts, the district courts, the special courts, those are all by congressional design, going back decades, in some cases, more than a century and a half now. So there's that. Then the other challenge is that the courts have no way in which they can enforce their rulings. It is entirely dependent on respecting the rulings of the court. And what you have right now is you have an administration who's not enforcing, is not adhering to court orders. The ruling that came down, we're now in the month 6, going on month 6 of the Trump presidency. That ruling came down about 2 months ago about bringing back the gentleman from, I believe he was from El Salvador, who was wrongly sent to that El Salvadorian
Venezuela,
prison.
he went to El Salvador.
He went to, to bring him back. They haven't done that yet.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't done that yet. They haven't complied with it, and that's the danger here. And then when you take a look at the Supreme Court, it's very interesting what the court's doing, because it's a 6-3 conservative majority. They're tiptoeing on a lot of these things. It's as and I think John Roberts understands this, that it's almost as though they don't want to provoke or poke the bear, because if the president comes out and openly defies their ruling, then all bets are off. So they're taking this on a piece by piece basis, and they're giving him some wins, but they're also coming down on him on other areas. And that's the Supreme Court. When you go to the lower courts, he has right now the worst record of any president in administration in winning cases before federal courts. He is losing 87% of the cases. His administration, the Justice Department, is losing 87% of the cases it's presenting. And it's not just Democrat judges, which I hate that term, Democrat or Republican judges.
Oh, they're leftist activist judges.
Exactly.
That's the term.
It's news to a couple Reagan judges who ruled against him. Yes, there are still a few judges appointed by Ronald Reagan in the federal circuit. It's news to even Trump-appointed judges from his first term that are ruling. It's consistent across the board that these judges are ruling against him and ruling against the actions of his administration.
So the other vehicle I want to take for a spin here before we wrap up this edition of What the Hell Happened this week is, you've got a president that is exerting well beyond his bounds. You got a Congress that's a Republican-led Congress that is allowing it to happen, keeping their heads down, pushing on a bill that I don't think the general public likes when we're talking about kicking grandma and children off of Medicaid, and they can say that they're not doing that. Well, they are. You can go talk to some of the long-term nursing care in whatever state you're watching this in to get the real concern out there. Kevin Cramer of North Dakota is wanting to add Medicare to it on the Senate version of this. You've got the opposition party, and if you look at what people think of them, not a position on bid. I mean, they've built up their entire party structure on, well, at least I ain't that guy when it comes to Donald Trump, but that guy's got a higher favorable rating than the Democratic Party right now. I think they kind of got it coming from both sides. You have Democrats that are party loyalists that want them to be doing more to oppose the president. You have those that, as I alluded to earlier, don't really pay all that much attention. They don't make themselves suffer like we do of following what's going on in the world of politics here. And, they're in the belief that the Democrats just care about those social issues. That they don't care about that working individual out there that is trying to, afford their groceries, have a home or an apartment that's affordable, get their kids to school, whatever it might be. They are in no man's land. And what are they doing about it? They're trying to study this mysterious creature that is the young American man. They have to have focus groups. They're going out trying to study whom. I mean, I'm not that young anymore, but it goes back to, Jason, for me, is they've always wanted to talk about people like me, talk about people like you in the Midwest and these rural areas. And I've always encouraged them, instead of talking about us, why don't you come out and talk with us? In fact, listen to us. I don't know what in the world they're doing besides just spinning their tires and really getting nowhere.
So we're 8 months since the Democrats lost the presidential election, lost seats in Congress, and we're still in the therapy session. Apparently, if you're the Democratic Party, where they're sitting there talking to their therapist, trying to figure everything out. And I love your point about the American male. We've been reading, I read up on this stuff all the time, as you do, and I immediately think of those nature shows that Richard Attenborough narrated nature shows. We're going to go out into the wild and discover this creature called the American male. Apparently they like to drink beverages made of barley. they like to go out there, and apparently they ride in motorboats on the weekends. And
How
they
long
go
have you
out
been working on this this impression? You've been waiting to drop this. You've been waiting for us to bring this back to drop that on us.
No, I mean, it's
Just natural.
It's just natural. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I mean, and then the story that comes out is that, and you and I have talked about this on your show about, the two parties have unique characteristics. We talk a lot about the Trump administration, what's happened to the Republican Party. We need to talk about what happens to the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party is very effective at messaging. Right. They're effective at the politics of grievance and mobilization. They're not effective at governing. The Democrats, on the other hand, they can't mobilize or message their way out of a wet paper sack, but they're pretty good at governing. But they seem to think that, we're going to pass a big infrastructure bill, we're going to pass a health care bill, and then the people are just going to be grateful, and we don't have to really message or sell it.
Yeah.
So the Democrats are at a point right now where they are in the situation that they're in because of the consultant class. And these stories that are coming out are reinforcing I think, the dire situation the party's in, because they're putting together slide decks, going to luxury hotels, literally luxury hotels. That was what was in the New York Times, where these consultants are getting together with these Democratic donors, and they're spending weekends talking about how we're going to go out and we're going to win over voters and how we need to do focus groups with males. You don't go to a luxury hotel on the East Coast or the West Coast. Why didn't you go to Saginaw, Michigan? Why didn't you go out to Peoria? Why don't you go out to a bar in Middle America?
Get to the dive bar and listen.
Listen.
Don't even come in. Don't bother bringing the laptop or a PowerPoint or a slide deck, whatever kids are calling these days. Just go and listen.
Listen.
It's going to be jarring, I can tell you this. I mean, stopping at the old truck stop bar cafe and diner, just kind of sit and get a vibe of what people are talking about. I mean, it's surprising at times. There's a lot of a disagreement I have, but it's telling where they are, and it's not where Democrats believe they are. I mean, you talk about messaging that's just masterful of the Republican Party. They can boil everything down, and who doesn't like, hey, we're going to cut taxes? I mean, the messaging is simple. To actually win, and then it's what you do after you win. And Democrats can't seem to figure that out. Having a whole sheet of a PowerPoint of, okay, we're going to here, you lose them after point one, and they're not coming back. And if you've been labeled as only caring about LGBTQ individuals or some of those other woke mentalities, and the perception's there. It might not be accurate, but that is what people believe the Democratic Party is now.
Because I think the Democratic Party has, and this is, and it's not just Democrats. You see this across the Democratic world with center-left parties, all right, where they have become dominated by essentially the faculty lounge, the intellectual class. And the reason for that is, and they were always in those parties to begin with, but they were counterbalanced or they were outnumbered by laborers, by union members, and the problems for these center left parties really started. You saw this in the 1980s when the proportion of union workers decreased in the population, and as that number went down, so did the influence of the labor unions. And those labor union members, by and large, were social conservative working class voters that counterbalanced the intellectual class's tendencies to go to the left. Well, when their influence goes down, now the intellectual classes have taken over the two parties, or taken over the Democratic Party. And what's interesting with Democrats is, when you watch the Democrats, they've forgotten that the essence of politics is motivation and mobilization. Instead, they now see it as a pursuit to educate voters. You've got to educate them. So then you engage in an effort to educate, and if you're educating, you're losing. Because invariably, when you try to educate, you're going to start talking down to voters.
Right.
And you start talking amongst yourselves. And that's the problem when you look at Democrats and you look at the congressional leadership for the Democratic Party, and when you look at the 18 people who are being mentioned as possible Democratic presidential candidates in 28, so many of them come from blue states. You come from blue states where your concern is placating the left, not going out there and trying to connect with center-right Americans. And they've lost the audience even within many in their own party who are sympathetic to them. Because I'll give you an example. I have friends across the country, and I have friends and family in several states, but in particular in the Twin Cities. I have one of them who is a Democratic voter, not a Trump supporter at all. We talk politics quite a bit. But I knew that this issue, you brought up LGBTQ, I knew this issue on the trans issue, trans athletes, had resonance when he volunteered out of the blue and said, almost in kind of a whispered voice, he says, I am opposed to biological males playing in women's athletics. And he said, it's just common sense. Now, this is a guy who says, hey, I oppose discrimination, I'm all for gay rights, but this is just common sense. And he says, what are they doing in advocating for this? That was kind of a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
It was. This is a good guy. This is a good guy. He doesn't have a discriminatory bone in his body. But this is a guy that's just saying, hey, this is a bridge too far for me. Well, what's the response of the party? Well, now we got to educate him. Yeah. We have to inform. No, this is how a voter feels. Mm-hmm. You have to accept how the voter feels in politics.
Yeah, and the rush to judgment is what you were just getting at. That we got to educate them because they don't understand it. They don't know it. There are some things that you're not going to get through to, and if you're going to try to push that upon somebody, you're going to drive them further away. From wanting to, check the box that's behind your candidate. They got a long road ahead, clearly.
They do.
Before we wrap up for this week and just recapping, because there was one international thing that happened this week that I didn't even put this on any sheet or relayed to you, but the Ukrainian drone attack in Russia that took out a number of, Russia's warplanes, which I will note for those of you that targeted to military targets instead of civilian targets, which I think is a very...
They didn't hit a hospital with children?
Yeah. Well,
amazing.
I mean, there's some people that want to say, well, both sides are doing this. Well, one is targeting civilian populations. One is targeting military infrastructure that is being used to attack those civilian structures. But how this changes, military warfare going forward. I mean, the drones are cheap. Not all drones. You had that moment of surprise. It says, I'm curious because you're a historian. I mean, a history buff. What was your reaction to seeing the success of this thing that had been planned for over a year and how it was executed?
Tyler, everybody who listens to your show, everybody that knows you knows where you come down politically. All right?
Yeah.
Pretty sensible guy. I try to endeavor when to come on these shows to try to do it down the middle and as you can see, try to criticize both sides, and poke holes here. I'm not going to do that in the war with Russia and Ukraine. I'm totally all in on the Ukrainians, and because there is black and white, and there is good and evil in this world, and what Russia is doing is purely evil, and what the Ukrainians did was nothing short of absolutely brilliant. In doing what they did in bringing in those drones. This was an operation that was planned for over a year.
Yeah.
They brought these drones in. They smuggled them into Russia a few hundred miles, several hundred miles, in fact, to get them into these positions. This was all carefully orchestrated. And this is, and I think the world needs to realize this, at some point in time, there will be some kind of a ceasefire agreed to. It will probably be as currently constituted with the current administration, probably more to the benefit of Russia at the moment. But this isn't going to end anytime soon. I've read a lot where the Ukrainians are already looking at the Israeli model, which was The Israelis, after the 72 massacre of their Olympians in Munich, devised the plan where they went out to take out those terrorists. And the Mossad, which is one of the most feared intelligence agencies in the world, engages in assassination, taking out Israel's enemies. That's a model the Ukrainians are looking at long after this war is over. And you're going to see this, where this is going to continue. The Ukrainians, once this war is over, they're going to get their retribution. Getting back to the attack itself, the brilliance of it is because it was a huge psychological blow to the Russians. It was also a tactical blow to the Russians. They lost fighters. They lost heavy bombers. And that was a very clear message to the rest of the world outside of the United States, to Europe in particular, to Australia, to the world that is aligned with him, to continue flowing military aid as much as possible into Ukraine.
Yeah,
they bought themselves a lot of time, I think, with this attack.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you said that I disagree with. Yeah, it showed that, well, one, like you say, this is far from over. Bought them time, perhaps bought them some resources because, boy, they've got the means in the world to continue this fight. And I'm not sure where this administration is finally going to land. One thing that did surprise me, it was last week, so it didn't happen this week, was it seemed for a moment that our president was finally, I don't want to say taking a turn, but being the most forceful I'd ever seen him do when it comes to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, his tone had changed last week.
And it was, okay, is this going to stick? Is this going to hold? And he was noticeably quiet after this drone attack by the Ukrainians on Russia. Anything on that?
Well, you're right. Trump's tone had changed over the last 2 weeks. You recall that when he was in Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis, there was this impromptu meeting in St. Peter's Basilica. Yeah. The photos came out where he was having a face-to-face meeting, private meeting with Zelensky, and it seemed as though from that moment forward, Trump's tone had changed somewhat. Now, he's been quiet, but what one comes across is reports that they're not happy because they feel as though this is going to prolong the war. Trump was wanting to get a ceasefire in this conflict, and now they're confident that this war is now going to continue for the foreseeable future.
Jason, it's no surprise because of the volume of things that happened this week. We didn't even scratch the surface. And perhaps it's because it's been like 3 years since we've done this, 2 years, whatever it's been. So here's the foundation. What we'll do going forward on these weekly recaps is focus in on the headlines, go into the deep dive of what it means for you, not just us bantering back and forth over a variety of things, but when there's so much in the news cycle that happens every single day, by the time Friday or Saturday morning, whenever you watch this, maybe Sunday, it doesn't matter, you forget some of what happened. Hell, I think we forgot some of what happened this week throughout the course of this conversation, but we'll be sure to bring that to you and break it down from a Midwest perspective, both of us being North Dakota boys, and try to make sense of what the hell happened this week. Jason, any parting words before I let you go?
Well, I think that, today is, as we record this, is June 6th, which is the anniversary of D-Day. And I think that we only have a handful of D-Day veterans left in this world. And it is a tragedy to let that day get lost in the mists of history. And I always think on a day like today, because I always regard as a history student of history, that the years in particular of 1944 through 49 were the finest hours of America. If you believe in Providence, you could look and say, this is what America was supposed to do. And the men that landed on those beaches on D-Day were ordinary men, average age 19, came from all across the United States. And I think of Hank Reinisch from my hometown of Garrison, North Dakota. In the summer of 1993, my dad was working on their house as a contractor, and his wife, who was getting up there in years, was going to paint the bathroom. And he said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I got to paint our bathroom." And Dad said, I got somebody that can do that. So here I was, 14, drafted to go in and paint their bathroom. But those couple days that we were there working on their house, got to know Hank. And some years later, Hank lived to be about 97, 98 years old. I get a call from my mom saying, Hank Reinisch died. You should read his obituary. And I read his obituary, and I was floored. I didn't know. I knew he was a veteran. I knew he had served in the war. But here he was. He had landed on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. He was with one of 200 soldiers in Company I, which was known as the Tough Hombres. And at the end of the conflict, that battle, he was one of only 11.
Wow.
Who had survived that day. And when he came back home, he married his sweetheart. They had 4 sons, and he worked as the blade operator for McLean County. And he had a small engine repair business, and he'd go to the Legion meetings, and he was the nicest guy you ever knew. He served for a time on his church council. And he died, and later that year at Christmas, when I was home seeing family, I bumped into Mona, and I said to Mona, I had no idea that he was in D-Day. And she says, Jason, he never wanted to talk about it. And finally, she said, just within the last few years, she said, we told him, you owe it to your sons and your grandchildren to talk about that day. He just put that in the back of his mind, and he said to her something that I've just never forgotten, which is a sentiment expressed by so many of those men and women who served on the home front building up the war machine, which was, we had a job to do.
I got nothing to add to that. I mean, to have those experiences, and I think what I heard, there's a lot of people that have seen horrific things that have done, the service for their country that haven't been willing or wanting to talk about it, that are walking and among us and our neighbors, and I'm glad that they were able to get him to talk about it, so that history that he lived through over there was able to get brought home and then not forgotten by you bringing it up here as we close out this week. Jason, it's always a pleasure to catch up. We'll do this again to recap what the hell happened next week, the week after that, and, well, the weeks ahead, I guess. But for those of you watching, until next time, you take care of yourself, and we'll be back to recap what the hell happened next week.